This video will contain spoilers about Doki Doki Literature Club. I recognize that the title can be a bit of a spoiler on its own, but I will be talking about elements of the story and the context that they're presented in. If you have not yet played Doki Doki Literature Club, I'd recommend taking the time to download the game and give it a play. It is free on Steam, or you can find it by googling Doki Doki Literature Club and downloading it off the official site. The game takes about 5 to 6 hours depending on how fast you can read through the game. I also recommend checking the link that is given to you at the start of the game and to take the trigger warning presented seriously. Those who have had issues with depression, suicide, self-harm, and abuse might want to skip this game for their own mental health. If you have depression, talk to a professional. If you're considering committing suicide, please call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. Or if you live outside of the United States, go to the link in the description and find the suicide hotline for where you live. It may not seem apparent, but there are people who care and will help you. Doki Doki Literature Club is the most emotionally impactful game that I've played in the past few years. This game took my empathy and tendency to quickly attach to characters and used that to hurt me in ways I honestly don't think I've experienced since the ending of Season 1 of Telltale Games' The Walking Dead. The main way that Doki Doki Literature Club got to me was through the character who I would consider to be the main character of the game, even if she isn't present for the entire game, and that character is Sayori. But before I talk about the game, I think it's important that I explain my own history with depression. My life has been affected by depression. Not that I have suffered from it personally, but unfortunately many people I know have had to deal with depression, both when I was younger and currently. I can still remember sitting in a Skype call with one of my friends, unable to do anything as I helplessly listened to him cut himself to deal with the pain of a recent event with his girlfriend. Fortunately, I can say that all of the people I've known who have had depression are still around today. I recognize that I am fortunate not to have had to deal with depression myself, and things could have been much worse for me, but depression has still hurt me and the people that I care about. This is the context of my experience with depression before going into the game, which I think is very important to understanding how and why it affected me. So now let's get back to the main topic of the video, Sayori and her depression. For me, the first clue that Sayori had depression was her poem Bottles, where she talks about giving away her happy thoughts to her friends, continually digging deeper, ending the poem on a melancholy note, looking for more happy thoughts but saying that all she can hear is echoing. This kinda tipped me off. That combined with the conversation you have with Sayori about enjoying bittersweet things and using sad feelings to give her rain clouds a hug. Then, immediately afterwards, she talks about being more in touch with her feelings, how she was meant to express herself in that way, and how it helped her to understand her own feelings better. All of this stuff kinda gave me the hint that Sayori had something else going on and that she might not be alright. Later on, her leaving the club early, acting all happy despite her attitude towards you when you're talking to her and when sharing your poem, further enforced the idea that something was wrong with her. Then comes the chat with her on Sunday, where you go over to her house to talk to her. The scene that is prevented where the song My Confession plays as you get Sayori to admit that she suffers from depression was very moving to me, to the point that I began to tear up and cry. Despite seeing it coming, her admission that she suffered from depression still hit me really hard. Her oversleeping, always being hungry, as was mentioned by the main character, her actions over the last few days of the week, and her poem Bottles, it all started to make sense and reminded me of people that I've known who have also had depression. Her monologue afterwards, where she talked about how worthless she thought she was, didn't do much to help me either. Her talking about just wanting to make others happy and not wanting others to worry about her was all too similar to things that I've heard from other people I know who have had depression. As well as this, the main character's reaction to this is similar to the one that I've had when I was younger and I was learning of someone else's depression, simply being shocked by the revelation of not knowing what to do. Furthermore, the main character was surprised by the fact that she had managed to hide her depression from him. Sometimes depression can be apparent in some people, while others who suffer from it can do a good job of hiding it. I know this from experience. Based on the early few days, Sayori was likely doing a good job of hiding it from the main character, at least until she convinced him to join the club. The main character's reaction to it clearly demonstrates that he is lost and doesn't know what he needs to do. His reaction leads me to believe that he thinks the way to deal with depression is just to make the other person happier, but doesn't understand that depression can mess with the brain. This isn't exactly a problem the main character would be able to fix through his actions alone. While him standing by Sayori and supporting her would certainly help, what she really needs is a therapist, someone who can offer treatment through therapy and proper medication. So, after the main character talks about wanting to help her, Sayori goes on to explain what it's like for her, saying that she doesn't want to be cared about, that while it can be nice, that having others care about her also hurts, because she feels so useless. She goes on to say that the main character's attempts to help her are pointless because there is no way to help her. This is where she is wrong, and I feel that I need to say this. Depression may be something that you have to deal with for a long time. It may go away and come back, but you can fight it. But you don't need to fight it alone. It'll be difficult, but you need to tell those that care about you what you're going through, and you need to see a therapist. Through a combination of support from your friends, medication, and other techniques that a therapist might recommend, you can overcome depression. While you may feel that there isn't anyone who cares about you, this isn't true. There are people who care about you, even if you don't realize it. And gathering the energy to go see a therapist can be hard, but they can and will help you as long as you let them. The main character continues to try and help Sayori, but the way he goes about it is wrong, acting as if this is something that he could possibly do alone. The line the main character has where he says, "No matter what it takes, I'll figure out what needs to change, I'll make these feelings go away," show that the main character doesn't really know what he's doing. This line is well-meaning, but is ultimately misguided. Again, depression isn't something that any one person can deal with on their own. Shortly afterward, the main character will depart for his date with either Yuri or Natsuki, depending on who you chose. For me, the time spent with Yuri was kinda hard to enjoy with the thought of Sayori and her depression sticking with me. After finishing with the date, Sayori shows up again because she wanted to see how much fun you were having with either Yuri or Natsuki. Clearly she is conflicted, wanting the player to make friends with the other girls in the literature club, but also wanting the player to herself. After the other girl has departed, she confesses her feelings for the player, where the player is then given a choice, one that I personally found to be one of the toughest I've ever made in a game. That choice is between telling Sayori that he loves her as well, or that she will always be his dearest friend. Personally, I hate both of these choices because I didn't feel that either of them would help her. If you decide to tell her that she is your dearest friend, she says that this must be what it feels like to be stabbed in the chest, but that she deserves this, and that it's her punishment for being selfish. She then says that she will trust you with anything before breaking down in front of you, collapsing to her knees and screaming before running away back to her house. After this, the main character is left standing there, wondering if he could have done more. With the other option, the player tells Sayori that he loves her as well, and that making friends with the literature club has been nice, but that she is the most important person to him. They hug, but she continues to cry, stating that she thought this would always be the happiest moment for her, but that even now her rain clouds won't go away. The two then depart and it goes to the day of the festival. The main character wakes up and finds that Sayori is late, so he decides to make his way to school without her. Upon arriving, he finds that only Monika has arrived. He chats with her quick before reading Sayori's poem, which Monika has printed out on a pamphlet. The poem begins by repeating the words "get out of my head" over and over again, filling up the top of the paper. The poem then goes on to say, "Get out of my head before I do what I know is best for you. Get out of my head before I listen to everything she said to me. Get out of my head before I show you how much I love you. Get out of my head before I finish writing this poem." But a poem is never actually finished, it just stops moving. The main character then rushes to Sayori's house, and regardless of which choice you made, you enter her room and then find her body hanging from the ceiling. Although the end result is always the same with her hanging herself, I think that her thought process is different depending on which choice you make. If you tell her that you love her, then I think the reason she decided to hang herself was because the thing she thought would help cure her depression and make the rain clouds go away ended up being something that just felt empty for her. From this, she felt scared of what would happen, and this fear and despair made Sayori feel that there was only one way out, and that was to commit suicide. If you decided to tell her that she would always be your dearest friend, the pain of you turning down her confession hurt her so much that she couldn't handle the pain anymore, and she decided to end it all. Both options are, in my opinion, heartbreaking to think about. One where she kills herself out of fear and to run from her own feelings, and the other where the pain of the situation overwhelms her and she feels that the only way to deal with the pain is to take her own life. In the end, there is no way to save Sayori, and while I wish there was, ultimately the game might not work if the player was able to save her. While this isn't a common sentiment I have heard, some criticism of the game is that it has the message that you can't help those with mental illness. Personally, I don't believe the game gives off that message, but I still want to bring it up here and to also say that if someone you know does suffer from depression or any other mental illness, they are not beyond help, and if possible, you should do what you can to help them. While Doki Doki Literature Club is about a few things and each of the girls is a central character, it's hard for me to consider any of the other characters, even Monika, to be more important to the story than Sayori is. What she deals with and how it is presented to the player makes it somewhat difficult to at least not like Sayori, and for some people she is understandably their favorite character, and the fact that this is what essentially kicks off the game's main event makes it so that Sayori's place in the story is even more important. So while the game touches on self-harm with Yuri and abuse with Natsuki, I think these end up taking a backseat to Sayori's depression due to the fact that her depression is shown first and is the game's main first showing that isn't just some cutesy visual novel, but that something else is going on. In the end, all of this put together makes the depiction of Sayori's depression something that I consider to be very important. By making it so that her depression is so central to the plot and then doing a good job of writing it, Team Salvato was able to make Sayori's depression so emotionally impactful for me. While much of the online discussion and focus of the game is about Project Libitina and the ARG stuff that exists within the files of the game, the main takeaway for me was about depression and the other mental illnesses that real people have to deal with. Thank you for watching.